In this video, I'm going to show you how to mount a difficult tire onto a rim as tubeless. And I use Stan's rims a lot, but this method could work with other rims. And typically I use a standard tire with a tubeless rim. Sometimes you'll get a tire that has a looser fitting bead because it's not a tubeless ready tire, it's a standard tire, which most of these will still work. There's some tricks though that you got to use, and what I found is mountain bike tires and rims I don't have as much of a problem. I more have a problem with my cyclocross rim with a standard tire, but there are times when you'll have a mountain bike tire that's difficult to put on a tubeless rim set up as tubeless. So again, I'm going to show you some tricks of things that you can do to get this done. The first thing that I'm going to do is just go ahead and mount the tire onto the rim. And so I always like to hang up the rim over something, and I use just a hammer and a bench vise. So I'm just going to work the first bead onto the rim, and I'm going to work the second bead on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to just mount this up normal. Now I know this is my second wheel that I've done with this tire. I did the front, but I know by doing that this is going to be a difficult tire to put on and get it to air up as tubeless. But I'm going to try it because you always want to try it first the normal way, and then if it doesn't work, then you start to use some of these tricks. Alright, so I've got the tire on the rim, and important note here is that I have not added any Stan's sealant yet. Okay, it's just the tire with no tube onto the rim. The next thing that I'm going to do is I've got a bottle of just regular dishwashing soap in a spray bottle. I'm going to shake it up, and I'm just going to spray inside between the tire and the rim, and I'm going to go all the way around on both sides and get the just the soap kind of in there. You don't need to have a whole lot, just to lubricate it a little bit and get some soap bubbles in there. Okay, now that I've got the tire on the rim and I've got the soap bubbles in between the bead and the rim on both sides, now it's time to put some air in the tire. But let me mention too, when you mount the tire, make sure you pay attention to the tread and that it's going the right direction you want it to, because you're not going to take the tire off the rim, even if you try these tricks that I'm going to show later. You're going to go ahead and leave it this direction. So I'm going to use an air compressor, and I've got this adapter that I'm going to put on first because I have just a standard air nozzle on my air compressor, and I'm going to try to put the air in here, and I'm going to grab my safety glasses. I always recommend, if you're using high pressure air, to put on some safety glasses. And when I do this, I'm gonna whack the other side. Sometimes this makes it go on, just forcing that pressure around the tire. So I'm gonna whack it like this as I try to air it up. Okay, so as I predicted, this is going to be a difficult one to air up as tubeless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull one of the beads off, and I'm going to use a tire lever to do this. And I'm going to go around and just work the bead off because I'm going to put a tube inside. And I'll tell you why here in a minute, but let's just work this off and then we'll get the tube in. Alright, so I've got one bead off the side. I'm leaving one bead on, and you got to pull off pull out your Stan's valve so that we can put a tube in. I'm just going to push this out. This looks stuck in there pretty good. Okay, so I took the lock nut off, took the valve off, so we can put our tube in. Okay, now the reason that we're using a tube is because we're going to inflate the tire, and that's going to put both beads into the channel, which is the goal, is to get them to lock inside the channel of the rim. So we're going to get one bead in, and sometimes just having one in, we're going to pull the tube out and try to air it up after having that one bead locked in. If that doesn't work, the next step is, because this is a new tire and it hasn't really been perfectly formed yet, you can put the tube back in and let it sit for a couple hours. Sometimes that will allow the bead to form properly so that the air does not slip through it when you're trying to air it up. So let's go ahead and get this tube in. Okay, so I've got the tube in. At this point you can use a floor pump or an air compressor. If you use an air compressor, just make sure you don't go too much on the pressure. So I'm just going to use that since I've already got it here. And you're going to hear, as I air this up, you're going to hear the bead lock into the channel of the rim, and that's what we want. Okay, so we got those pops, which we really wish we could have heard when we mounted this up without the tube. That's what you're looking for. But now that I've got the tube in there, I'm actually going to let this sit for a couple hours and let that bead form. At this point, you could try pulling out the tube, leaving one of the beads locked into the rim, put a little bit more soap bubbles in between the one that you have to undo to take the tube out, put the bead back on and try to air it up that way. Sometimes that will work, and if that does work, then you can skip to the last step, and that is to inject the stands fluid into the valve stem. But again, I'm going to let this one sit for a while and see if that'll work. Alright, I'll let this tube sit in here for about 2 hours. So hopefully this will get the bead ready to lock in. So I'm going to take the tube out just by letting the air out and taking off one bead on the tire. Okay, so again, we're just taking off one bead. Make sure that you leave the other bead locked on to the channel of the rim. So try not to disturb the other one, and just take this one off just so we can slip the tube out. Okay, so I've got the tube out, and now I'm going to put the valve stem back inside the rim. And of course, make sure you put your little lock nut on there. Now again, we're not going to add the stand sealant yet. We want to try to get this other bead locked in. So one of them's in on the other side, and we're just going to put this one back on the rim. Okay, before I try to put the air in, I'm going to do the soap bubbles again. So just go around the whole thing and put some soap bubbles between the rim and the tire bead. Okay, got the soap bubbles on. Hopefully this is going to work. So I've got my adapter on. I'm going to hit it with the air compressor. And got to get my safety glasses. Don't forget those. Here we go. Okay. This one didn't go on, so I'm going to show you my last weapon. And fortunately for the video, it didn't go on, because if this last trick doesn't work, then the tire is probably not going to work on this rim. The only other thing that you could do is let the tube sit in there overnight, maybe even a couple days before trying this again. So I had to do this for the front, so it's going to hopefully work with this one, and that is using a CO2 cartridge. Because what the CO2 does is it just blasts the air in there and pushes the bead out fast enough to hopefully get it to lock into that channel. So let's try it. All right, I've got my CO2 ready to go. I'm gonna put it on and blast it in there, and hopefully this will work. Here we go. Got it. All right, it's on there. So now that we've got both beads locked into the channel of the rim, we can let the air out, because now we're gonna have to add the stands fluid. But since both beads are locked in, it's not a big deal. So let the air out, and then I'm going to remove the valve core to use the injector. And I'm going to use the stands injector, but you can also use a cheap syringe from a drugstore and just kind of put it in that way. But I've actually got the stands injector where you can measure the fluid and not have to suck it out of a cup. So let all the air out. I'm going to use the stand's valve stem or valve core remover and remove the core of the valve. And that's what the core looks like if you've never seen one taken out. Now I'm just going to measure in my stand's fluid and inject it into the valve stem. Got the injector screwed on, and I'm just going to inject in about 1.5 cups of fluid into the tire. And we'll put the valve core back in using the same tool used to take it out. Get in there pretty good. At this point you can use the air compressor, or you can use a pump, because the beads are locked in, so it's going to air right up. So I'll use my adapter and my air compressor, get the air in there. Alright, and again, if you're using an air compressor, make sure you don't overinflate. Now I'm going to do just what you typically would do and just go around, shake it, and then go all the way around, shaking it back and forth. And then I'm going to lay it on something like a trash can on each side for about 10 or 15 minutes. And what that does is it seals up the sidewalls of the rim. I'm sorry, the sidewalls of the tire. So this is what I use. I just leave it like this on a trash can, and I'll flip it over in about 10 or 15 minutes and get the other side. Alright, so those are my tricks to use if you have trouble getting a standard tire to seat up on a tubeless rim. Like I said in the beginning, I've never had a problem with a mountain bike standard tire and tubeless rim. It's mainly the cyclocross one for whatever reason, but if you ever have a problem, try these things. And unfortunately, if these don't work, there's a pretty good chance that that tire is just not going to work on that rim. The bead's going to be too loose. So good luck with it. Thanks for watching.